That morning in a small parking lot on the outskirts of Ohio, I met John, a typical 34-year-old American. He works full-time, earns a decent income. Not low, not high. The kind of person you might see at any grocery store, gas station, or office. John was standing next to his old Toyota, staring at a completely flat tire. No accident, no nail stuck in it. It was just a tire that had reached the end of its life and blew out on his way to work. A $200 problem. But to John, it felt like $2,000. I noticed he didn't call insurance. He didn't call a garage. He simply opened his phone, scrolled for a bit, and sighed. Guess I'll have to put it on my credit card. There's no other way. I asked him a simple question. Don't you have an emergency fund? You only need about $1,000. John shook his head. Not because he didn't know about emergency funds. He did. But for years, he's never been able to keep $1,000 in his account. Then he said something I'll never forget. If I could save $1,000, I wouldn't be here, standing next to a busted car at 8 a.m. A blown tire, a simple, ordinary thing. But for more than half of America, it's enough to ruin an entire month, or even 6 months of their financial lives. You think John's story is rare? It isn't. In America, 57% of adults can't cover an unexpected $1,000 expense, according to Bankrate 2024. Which means if a car breaks down, if a child gets sick, if rent suddenly goes up, more than half of Americans will end up just like John, surviving on credit cards. And the scariest part? This isn't only about poor people. Even those earning $60,000, $80,000 a year fall into this category. The Federal Reserve's SHED 2024 survey shows 35% of Americans have zero emergency savings. 18% have less than $500. And only 22% feel financially secure. When I left the parking lot that day, John's words still echoed in my head. If I had saved $1,000, I wouldn't be standing here. The strange thing is, John is not poor by traditional definitions. He has a steady income, around $48,000, $52,000 per year. Exactly the median income for an average American. So why can someone earning $4,000 a month not manage to save $1,000? The answer isn't in the numbers, it's in the behavior. According to Pew Research 2024, over 60% of Americans have seen their income increase in the past 5 years. But most don't feel better off. The main cause is lifestyle creep. When income increases, spending also rises. A $200 salary increase, upgrading the phone plan. A year-end bonus, buying a new laptop. Working overtime, eating out more often. Friends graduating, getting married, class reunions, spending hundreds of extra dollars per month. No one intentionally spends more. It's just that people get caught up in what behavioral scientists call the hedonic treadmill. You keep running faster, but you never get ahead financially. Americans earn more, but their standard of living increases faster than their ability to save. The result? Higher income, but still an empty bank account. And John is just one of tens of millions who fall into this trap. A week later, I called John to ask if he had resolved the car issue. He simply replied, I put it on my credit card. Now I'll pay it off in installments over 6 months. Sounds familiar, right? It's not just John. 62% of Americans are living in a state called paycheck-to-paycheck. Living off their salary, and when the paycheck runs out, so does the money. According to Lending Club's 2024 report, this number has been increasing for 3 consecutive years, even among those earning over $100,000 per year. The scary part isn't that they're poor, it's that they don't have a cushion. They get paid, pay bills, pay debts, buy necessities, end up with only $20 to $80 left at the end of the month. On lucky months, they might have $100 left. On unlucky months, the account goes down to $0 or even negative. In financial psychology, this is called the financial exhaustion loop. When you live like this for too long, the brain starts to prioritize survival first. The future comes second. Spending becomes emotional. Financial decisions are made in a firefighting mode. The brain no longer has the energy to plan long term. That's why just a small shock, like John's $200 tire, can cause everything to collapse. It's not because he doesn't earn money, it's because he doesn't have any breathing room to make mistakes. And that's why this loop is so dangerous. When talking to John, I realized he's not a spendthrift. He doesn't buy $200 shoes. He doesn't get the latest iPhone. He doesn't eat out too much. He just can't save. This surprises many people, but in financial behavior studies, this is quite normal. The reason lies in two psychological mechanisms that Richard Thaler and Daniel Kahneman have described. Present bias. The brain prioritizes the present over the future. The human brain is programmed to choose comfort right now. A nice meal, a convenient purchase, or simply not wanting to see the bank account too low. Saving $1,000 doesn't evoke any feeling. It's invisible, doesn't trigger dopamine. So the brain always postpones it. I'll deal with it tomorrow. Loss aversion. We fear loss more than we enjoy gain. When you deposit $100 into savings, the brain interprets it as losing $100 right now. The future benefit, less stress, financial security, is too distant to feel. For John, and millions of other Americans, saving isn't a knowledge problem. It's an evolutionary psychology issue. When combining both of these mechanisms, people easily get trapped. They know they need to save, but they just can't do it. It's not because they're incapable, it's because they're fighting against the mechanisms of their own brain. When I talked to John, I asked him a very simple question. What would happen if you couldn't fix your tire this month? He didn't even think before answering. I wouldn't be able to go to work, and if I can't go to work, I don't get paid. A $200, $300 emergency is nothing for some people, but for John and 57% of Americans, it's enough to trigger a dangerous domino effect. According to Bankrate 2024, most Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency with cash. So what actually happens when they face an unexpected expense? 1. They swipe their credit card at 21 to 28% interest. That $300 repair can turn into $420, $500 in just a few months. Debt creates more debt. 2. They postpone other bills. Money for the car. No money for electricity, water, or internet. One late bill, $25, $45 fee. 3. They skip work or lose hours. No car, was no commute. No commute, was no paycheck. No paycheck, was quad rent problems. According to number 2024, the average cost of a small emergency in the U.S. is car repair, $150, $750 urgent care visit, $300, $900 AC repair, $200, $650 traffic ticket, $50, $250. Just one of these is enough to push someone from fine to crisis. And for John, that blown tire was the first domino, the start of a chain reaction he couldn't control. After talking for a long while in that coffee shop that morning, I set my latte down and asked John, if you want to get out of this cycle, are you willing to rebuild your entire financial system from zero? John stayed silent for a few seconds. He wasn't the type who liked change. No one in his situation does. But the truth was, change was the only thing he hadn't tried. And then he finally said one simple sentence. I'm tired. I want out. That was the moment I gave him the first 3 steps. A small, simple system powerful enough to pull someone drowning in the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle back to the surface. Step 1. Stop the leaks. Identify 5 small drains eating his money. I didn't tell him to stop buying coffee. I didn't tell him to skip meals. I didn't tell him to live like a monk. We only did one very technical thing. Find where his money was leaking. And like most Americans, John had the usual suspects. $12.99, Apple iCloud storage, $4.99, HBO Max, $9.99, Canva, $39.99, gym membership, hasn't gone in 4 months, $7.49, a Substack newsletter he no longer reads. Total, $85.45 month, yearly, $125. John looked at the number and gave a forced smile. Just these are enough to cover my tire. That was the moment he realized. He didn't need to earn more immediately. He needed to stop the bleeding. Step 2. Create the $1,000 safety account. Not saving, but separating. I told John a truth most Americans don't know. The problem isn't that you can't save. The problem is that your savings sit in the same place as your spending money. When the money is mixed, the brain sees all of it as available to use. So I helped him open a completely separate account, even at a different bank. We named it Emergency Only Do Not Touch. Sometimes just naming it right is enough to change behavior. I told John, the goal isn't to fill it to $1,000 right away. The goal is to become someone who has an emergency account first. That psychological step matters. You cannot become the person who has an emergency fund if you don't have a place for it to go. Step 3. Automate $50 a week, small enough that the brain doesn't resist. Most people living paycheck to paycheck fail because they try to save too much too fast. I'll save $300 a month. I'll cut my spending by half. I'll put 20% away from now on. That is the fastest way to quit. So we chose $50 a week, not 100, not 200, just 50. And the most important part, automated. John doesn't touch it. I told him, $50 a week won't change your life, but $50 a week for 5 months can change your financial future. John looked at his banking app and whispered, $50, I can handle that. And yes, it's small enough not to stress him out, but large enough that after 20 weeks he'd have 50 x 20, $1,000 not from willpower, not from discipline, just from a system. The moment John shifted from surviving to building. After completing those 3 steps, John leaned back in his chair and exhaled, as if he had just put down a burden he'd carried for years. He said, for the first time, I feel like I'm controlling my money, not being controlled by it. He wasn't richer. He wasn't earning more. But he had momentum. He had a plan. And most importantly, he had hope. And that's the moment every sustainable financial turnaround begins.